When Lyra translated the final glyph on the tomb wall of the Kethrin homeworld, her hands started shaking. And it wasn't from the cold air of the dead planet's surface. The message carved into the stone was identical to the 17 other warnings she had found across the galaxy, each one left by a civilization that had gone extinct thousands of years before humanity ever looked up at the stars. Stay away from Sol 3. They guard something worse. She pressed her fingers against the ancient writing, her pointed ears twitching as she tried to make sense of it. Worse than what? Worse than the humans themselves? That seemed impossible. Humanity had a reputation across the known galaxy as the most relentless warriors anyone had ever encountered. The species that never surrendered, that turned every battle into a lesson in creative brutality, that somehow won wars they had no business surviving. Every spacefaring race knew to avoid human territory unless absolutely necessary. But 17 dead civilizations spanning different eras and different regions of space all left the exact same warning, with that curious word at the end. Worse, Lyra had devoted 3 years of her life to this mystery, traveling from one dead world to another, piecing together fragments of warnings and prophecies, and now she stood at a crossroads. She could file her report with the Galactic Archaeological Society, publish her findings, and let someone else investigate. Or she could do what every instinct in her body screamed was a terrible idea. She could go to Earth herself. "Computer, set course for the Sol system," she said quietly, her voice barely echoing in her small research vessel. The AI responded with a concerned chirp. "Warning. Human space. Recommend diplomatic clearance and military escort." Lyra smiled despite her nervousness. "Noted. Proceed anyway." The journey took 2 weeks, and with each passing day, Lyra found herself reviewing everything she knew about humans. They had appeared on the galactic stage only 200 years ago. And in that short time, they had fought 4 major wars, won all of them against superior forces, and earned a reputation that made hardened Krynax warriors uncomfortable. They were creative, unpredictable, and disturbingly good at turning anything into a weapon. But they were also surprisingly friendly in peacetime, known for their art, music, and an odd sense of humor that most species found baffling. They formed deep bonds with other races, kept their treaties, and showed genuine curiosity about alien cultures. It was a contradiction that fascinated her. When she finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, her screens immediately lit up with targeting locks and hails from 3 different human patrol ships. Her heart hammered in her chest as she transmitted her credentials and research permits, hoping her reputation as a xenoarchaeologist would be enough. The response came in accented but perfect galactic standard from a voice that sounded young and male. "Dr. Lyra Senevar of the Lysithian Confederacy, this is Captain Marcus Chen of the U.S. Vigilant. We've verified your credentials. State your purpose in human space." She took a breath, her luminescent skin glowing slightly brighter with nervousness. "Captain Chen, I'm researching ancient warnings left by extinct civilizations. Multiple sources reference Earth. I'm requesting permission to visit your homeworld and possibly interview human historians." There was a long pause, longer than necessary for a simple communication delay. When Chen responded, his tone had changed. "Dr. Lyra, I'm going to have you escorted to Earth directly. Don't deviate from the flight path. We're transmitting. And doctor, whatever you think you know about those warnings, the truth is going to be different than you expect." That should have reassured her. Instead, it made her more afraid. Earth was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. Blue and green and white, wrapped in swirling clouds, dotted with lights on the dark side that showed countless cities. Her escort brought her down to a landing facility in a place called Geneva, and within an hour of landing, she found herself in a conference room with 3 humans who introduced themselves as representatives of something called the Guardian Council. The woman who seemed to be in charge had steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. Her name was Director Sarah Okonkwo, and she studied Lyra with an intensity that made the alien archaeologist want to fidget. "Dr. Lyra, you've traveled a long way chasing a mystery. Before we discuss those warnings, I need to ask, are you prepared for an answer that might change how you see the universe?" Lyra's pointed ears flicked forward, a sign of determination in her species. "I've spent 3 years on this investigation. I need to know the truth." The director nodded slowly, then gestured to one of her companions, a younger man with kind eyes and dark skin, who introduced himself as Dr. James Okafor, a xenohistorian. "Then let me tell you a story. James said, his voice gentle but serious. About 13,000 years ago, long before humans built cities or discovered fire, something arrived in our solar system. We call it the Whisper, though that's not really what it is. It's old, Doctor. Older than most stars. And it's hungry. Lyra felt ice forming in her stomach. Hungry for what? Consciousness, Sarah answered. Sapient thought. The Whisper feeds on civilizations. It doesn't destroy them quickly. It infiltrates their thoughts, their dreams, their cultures. It turns them against themselves slowly, creating paranoia, hatred, fear. Civilizations touched by the Whisper tear themselves apart from the inside, and it feeds on their suffering and eventual extinction. Every dead world you visited, Doctor? The Whisper killed them all. The room seemed to tilt around Lyra. She gripped the edge of the table, her mind racing. But that means, if it came to Earth 13,000 years ago, James nodded grimly, it should have killed us too. By every pattern we've found in our research, humanity should have destroyed itself thousands of years ago. We should be another dead world with a warning carved in ruins. So what happened? Lyra whispered. Why are you still here? Sarah and James exchanged a look that held years of shared burden. Then Sarah said the words that would haunt Lyra's dreams. Because we didn't destroy it. We caught it. We trapped it. And for 13,000 years, in one form or another, humanity has been its prison. The silence that followed was deafening. Lyra's brilliant mind, trained to piece together fragments of the past, suddenly understood everything. The warnings weren't telling people to stay away from humanity. They were warnings about what would happen if humanity ever failed in their eternal duty. Where is it? She asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Beneath the ice of Antarctica, in a facility that has been maintained in various forms since before recorded history. We don't know how the first humans trapped it. We lost that knowledge during the Younger Dryas, when much of early human civilization collapsed. But somehow, someway, our ancestors, who were barely more than hunter-gatherers, managed to contain something that had destroyed star-spanning empires. And we've been maintaining that prison ever since. James pulled up a holographic display showing a vast underground facility. Every major human culture has known about it in some form. It's been the secret behind secret societies, the truth hidden in myths and legends. The Guardians have had different names throughout history, but the mission has always been the same. Keep the Whisper contained, no matter the cost. Lyra stared at the hologram, her mind reeling. The wars, she said suddenly. The reason humans fight so fiercely, never surrender, is because we've been at war for 13,000 years, Sarah confirmed. Every generation of humans grows up knowing, on some level, that failure is not an option. Our entire civilization, our culture, our technological development, everything has been shaped by the need to maintain the prison. We became warriors because we had no choice. We became relentless because the alternative is the extinction of every sapient species in the galaxy. Why didn't you tell the other races? Lyra demanded. Why keep it secret? Would you believe us? James asked quietly. Think about it, Doctor. Humanity shows up on the galactic stage, already militarized, already organized around a command structure that spans our entire planet. We tell everyone we're guarding an ancient cosmic horror that feeds on civilization itself. Does that sound like truth? Or does it sound like a convenient excuse for why we're so dangerous? Would the galaxy trust us, or would they decide to eliminate the threat we represent? Lyra opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right. The galaxy already feared humanity. If they knew humans were the jailers of something worse, the temptation to destroy Earth would be overwhelming. Better to eliminate the prison and what it held in one strike than risk either escaping. So you let them fear you, she said softly. You let the galaxy think you're the monsters, because it's safer than them knowing the truth. Sarah's expression softened slightly. We do what's necessary. We always have. Lyra sat back in her chair, her silver hair falling around her shoulders as she processed everything. 3 years of research, answered in a single conversation. But the academic part of her mind wasn't satisfied. I need to see it, she said. The facility, the prison. I need to verify this. She expected them to refuse. Instead, Sarah and James exchanged another look, and the director nodded. We were hoping you'd say that. Because, Doctor, Lyra, we didn't just ask you here to answer your questions. We need your help. My help? Lyra felt her heart rate spike. What could I possibly offer? James leaned forward, his kind eyes intense. The prison is failing. Not immediately, not catastrophically, but we've detected degradation in the containment field over the past 50 years. It's technology we still don't fully understand, built by humans who shouldn't have been capable of building it. We've maintained it, reinforced it, but we're working blind. We need fresh eyes, someone with your expertise in ancient civilizations and lost technology. Someone who studied the Whisper's other victims and might see patterns we've missed. The weight of what they were asking hit Lyra like a physical force. They wanted her to help save humanity's prison, to potentially save the galaxy from something that had already killed countless civilizations. It was insane. It was terrifying. It was the most important thing she would ever do. When do we leave? She asked, and she saw something like relief cross both their faces. The facility in Antarctica was unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. The entrance was hidden beneath 3 kilometers of ice, accessible only through a heavily fortified military base that officially didn't exist. As they descended in a high-speed elevator that took nearly 20 minutes to reach the bottom, James stayed by her side, explaining what they knew and what they guessed. The Whisper exists partially outside normal space, he said. It's not fully in our dimension, which is probably how it moves between star systems. The prison doesn't destroy it, because we don't think it can be destroyed. Instead, it holds the Whisper in a kind of stasis, preventing it from extending its consciousness beyond the containment area. How big is it? Lyra asked, watching the depth counter tick down. We don't know. The part we can perceive is about 3 meters across, but that might just be the portion that intersects with our reality. It could be much larger in dimensions we can't see. The elevator finally stopped, and the doors opened onto a corridor carved from living bedrock. The walls were covered in symbols that made Lyra's trained eye widen in recognition. These are from different eras, she breathed, moving closer. This section is at least 10,000 years old, but this one is maybe 2,000. And this looks recent, 15 years, James confirmed. Every generation adds to it. Warnings, technical notes, prayers, whatever helps them process what we're guarding. They walked through corridors that told the story of human civilization in reverse, going back through history with each level they descended. Lyra saw Latin, ancient Greek, hieroglyphics, cuneiform, and symbols she didn't recognize that must have predated writing itself. Every one of them said essentially the same thing in different ways. We hold the line. We do not fail. Finally, they reached the central chamber, and Lyra forgot how to breathe. The room was vast, easily 100 meters across, and in the center floated something that hurt to look at directly. It shifted and writhed, never quite the same shape twice, occasionally resolving into forms that suggested wings, tentacles, eyes, or things that had no name. Around it, a lattice of energy glowed with soft blue light, forming geometric patterns that Lyra recognized from her research. The Kethrans use this configuration, she said, pointing. And this element is from the Vorkath containment techniques. How did primitive humans know these patterns? We don't know, Sarah said, having joined them in the chamber. That's one of the mysteries. It's as if the knowledge was given to them, or they intuited it somehow. But it worked, and we've been building on that foundation ever since. Lyra approached the containment field, pulling out her scanning equipment. For the next 6 hours, she worked, taking readings, comparing the energy signatures to data from the dead worlds she'd studied. James stayed with her the entire time, answering questions, offering insights, and occasionally making her laugh with dry observations about the absurdity of their situation. She found herself liking him immensely. He was brilliant but humble, carrying the weight of humanity's burden without letting it crush his kindness. When she finally stepped back from her instruments, she understood why they were worried. The harmonics are degrading, she confirmed. Not quickly, but it's measurable. You might have a century, maybe 2, before the containment fails completely. Can it be fixed? Sarah asked, and there was a note of desperation in her voice that made Lyra's heart ache. This woman had spent her entire life in service of this mission, and the thought of failing terrified her. I think so, Lyra said slowly. But I need time to study it, to compare it with the techniques the other civilizations used before they fell. If I can understand why their containment failed and yours succeeded, I might be able to help you reinforce it. She looked at the Whisper, at the thing that had killed so many civilizations, and felt a strange mix of scientific curiosity and primal terror. But I need to know something first. Why me? You could have consulted with the Galactic Council. brought in experts from a dozen races. James and Sarah exchanged one of their meaningful looks. And then James said quietly, because everyone else would want to destroy it. The standard galactic protocol for existential threats is overwhelming force and complete annihilation. But we've tried to destroy it, Doctor. For thousands of years we've tried. Nothing works. It exists into many dimensions, and every attempt to destroy it just weakens the containment. The galaxy would glass Earth from orbit rather than risk the whisper escaping. And it wouldn't even slow it down. We need someone who understands that some things can't be killed, only contained. Someone who's spent years studying dead civilizations and might actually want to prevent another one. Lyra felt the weight of his words settle onto her shoulders. They were trusting her with the truth because they had no choice. And because somewhere in their analysis of her career and personality, they had decided she might actually help rather than report this to the council. They were right, but it was still terrifying. I'll need access to your historical archives, she said. And I'll need to set up a research station here. This is going to take months, maybe years. You'll have whatever you need, Sarah promised. And Dr. Lyra, thank you. You're saving more lives than you can possibly imagine. The next 6 months passed in a blur of research, analysis, and discovery. Lyra set up her equipment in the facility, and James became her constant companion, helping her navigate human historical records and offering insights from humanity's perspective. They worked 16-hour days, took meals together in the facility cafeteria, and slowly became friends in the way that only shared purpose and isolation could forge. She learned that he had joined the Guardian program after his sister died in a containment breach 15 years ago, that he played violin to relax, and that he made terrible coffee but excellent tea. He learned that she was considered strange among her own people for her obsession with dead things, that she had a photographic memory, but couldn't carry a tune, and that she got adorably excited when she made breakthrough discoveries. The first major breakthrough came when Lyra cross-referenced the Vorkath containment failure with human mythological texts about binding rituals. The other civilizations tried to contain the whisper with technology alone, she explained, her eyes bright with excitement as she showed James her findings. But humans combine technology with something else. Look at these symbols carved into the bedrock. They're not just decorative. They're intentions made physical, willpower transformed into structure. Your ancestors somehow understood that the whisper feeds on consciousness, so they use consciousness as part of the prison. Every human who knows about the whisper and chooses to maintain the prison is actively strengthening it. James stared at the data, his mind clearly racing. That's why the Guardian program works. Why? We've always had humans physically present in the facility. We're not just maintaining the technology, we're part of the containment ourselves. Exactly, Lyra said, and without thinking, she grabbed his hand in her excitement. James, this is brilliant. Your species weaponized willpower and determination. That's why you've succeeded where everyone else failed. The moment hung between them, her hand in his, both suddenly aware of how close they were standing. James looked at her, really looked at her, and Lyra felt her luminescent skin glow brighter in response to emotions she hadn't expected to feel. Lyra, he said softly, I need to tell you something. But before he could continue, alarms blared throughout the facility, and Sarah's voice cut through the speakers. Containment fluctuation. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. They ran to the central chamber, where the whisper was moving in ways Lyra had never seen before, the containment field flickering and sparking. What's happening? She demanded, pulling up readings on her portable scanner. We don't know, Sarah said, her face pale. The field strength is dropping, but we haven't changed anything. Lyra's mind raced, analyzing data, comparing patterns, and then she saw it. It's not the technology failing, she said. It's the consciousness component. Something's changed in the collective human while maintaining the prison. James cursed softly. The Alvirian Summit. Sarah, the peace talks with the Alvirian Empire are happening today. If they succeed, humanity won't be at war for the first time in a century. Understanding crashed through Lyra like a wave. Humanity's entire civilization was built around being warriors, around the endless conflict that their secret were demanded. If they made peace, if they lowered their guard even slightly, the containment would weaken. We can't let the talks fail, Sarah said firmly. We've been trying to achieve peace with the Alvirians for decades. We can't sabotage that just to maintain our war footing. You won't have to, Lyra said, her mind already working on the solution. James, what if we expand the consciousness component? What if it wasn't just humans maintaining the prison? She saw understanding dawn in his eyes. You want to tie your own will into the containment structure, not just mine. If we can prove this works, we can eventually bring in volunteers from across the galaxy. Individuals who understand the threat and choose to help contain it. We transform humanity's burden into a shared galactic responsibility. Sarah looked between them, hope and fear warring on her face. That would mean revealing the truth. The whole galaxy would know. They'll find out eventually, Lyra said. Better to control the revelation, to bring in allies who can help shoulder the burden. And better to do it before the containment fails completely. She turned to James, her pointed ears flat against her head in determination. Show me how to do this. Show me how to add my will to the prison. What followed was the most terrifying experience of Lyra's life. James guided her through a meditation technique passed down through generations of guardians, teaching her to focus her consciousness, to project her determination into the containment structure itself. She felt the whisper's attention turn toward her, felt it probing at her thoughts, looking for weaknesses. It showed her visions of her homeworld burning, of everyone she loved suffering, of failure and darkness and despair. But she also felt James beside her, his consciousness intertwined with hers, lending her strength. And she felt the thousands of humans throughout history who had stood in the same spot, making the same choice, holding the same line. She thought about the dead worlds she had studied, the civilizations that had fallen. And she made a choice. No, she said, both aloud and in the depths of her mind. You don't get to win. Not today. Not ever. Her will, trained by years of scholarly discipline and strengthened by newfound purpose, slammed into the containment structure like a physical force. The field stabilized, then strengthened, glowing brighter than before. When Lyra opened her eyes, she was on the floor of the chamber, James kneeling beside her with tears streaming down his face. It worked, he whispered. God, Lyra, it worked. The containment is stronger than it's been in decades. She managed a weak smile. Good, because I don't think I can do that again anytime soon. He helped her to her feet, and for a moment, they just stood there, holding each other in relief and something deeper. Sarah watched them with a knowing expression, then cleared her throat. Doctor, Lyra, on behalf of the Guardian Council and all of humanity, I'm offering you a permanent position. Help us reveal this truth to the galaxy in a way that doesn't start a war. Help us build a new model of containment that doesn't require humanity to be eternal warriors. Help us transform this burden into something sustainable. Lyra looked at the whisper, still writhing in its prison, then at James, whose hand was still holding hers. She thought about her career, her life among her own people, everything she would be giving up. Then she thought about the alternative, about another dead world with another warning carved in ruins. I'll help, she said, on one condition. We do this right. No more secrets than absolutely necessary. No more letting humanity bear this alone. We build something better. Sarah smiled, and it transformed her entire face. Deal. The next year was chaos in the best possible way. Lyra and James worked together to document everything, to create a presentation that would convince the Galactic Council without triggering panic. They brought in carefully selected xenobiologists, physicists, and consciousness researchers from a dozen species, each one sworn to secrecy until they were ready for the full revelation. The Elvirian peace talks succeeded, and humanity began the long process of transitioning from a war footing to something resembling normal civilization. The containment held because Lyra had proven it could be maintained by non-humans, and slowly, carefully, they built a volunteer corps of guardians from across the galaxy. When they finally revealed the truth to the Galactic Council, there was shock, fear, and anger, as expected. But there was also understanding, especially from the older races, who had always wondered about the warnings from dead civilizations. The debate raged for months, but eventually, a resolution passed. The whisper would remain contained, with Earth as its eternal prison, but humanity would no longer bear the burden alone. On the day the first Galactic Guardian volunteers arrived at the Antarctic facility, Lyra and James stood together on the ice above, watching the transport ships descend. You changed everything, James said quietly. You gave us a future we never thought we could have. Lyra leaned against him, feeling the cold wind on her face and the warmth of his presence beside her. We changed it together. That's how this works. Now, No one stands alone. He turned to her, his expression serious. I love you, you know. I think I have, since you grabbed my hand in excitement over ancient binding rituals. She laughed, the sound carrying across the frozen landscape. I love you too. Even though you make terrible coffee. That's fair, he said, and kissed her while the transport ships landed and the future unfolded around them. Years later, when Lyra gave lectures on the whisper and the containment effort, she always ended with the same quote, the words that had driven her investigation and ultimately revealed the truth. Every dead civilization left the same warning. They guard something worse. What those civilizations didn't understand is that sometimes, the monsters are the only ones brave enough to guard us from the darkness. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we learn that we don't have to be monsters forever. We just have to be willing to stand together when it matters most. The containment field, now maintained by thousands of conscious wills from across the galaxy, glowed steady and strong in the darkness beneath the ice. Humanity was finally free to be more than warriors, but they would never forget the 13,000 years they had stood alone against the darkness. And in the deepest part of the facility, carved in stone by Lyra's own hand in a dozen languages, was a new message for whatever civilizations might come after. They guarded something worse until they didn't have to guard it alone. Learn from their example. Some burdens are too heavy for one species to carry, but together, we can hold back the night forever. The whisper remained in its prison, dreaming of freedom it would never have, contained by the collective will of a galaxy that had finally learned to stand united against the darkness. And on Earth, in a small apartment in Geneva, Lyra and James built a life together, two scholars who had saved the galaxy and found love in the process. Proof that even in the shadow of cosmic horror, hope and connection could flourish.